business wins are we having this week? I'm gonna need at least a couple here. Anybody that is winning this week? Any just even just personally or in the business?
I'd like to share something. This year we've started really well. Last year we got a 1.3 million in sales receipts, and then up to date for this year, and February hasn't even ended and we're already over 500,000. So if we keep going what we're doing, we're probably gonna surpass that number pretty soon and be well on for our next tier, which is reaching $3 million this year.
Come on, that's phenomenal.
Oh, come on, Felipe.
Yes, sir.
Well,
thank you, guys.
We don't want to intimidate anybody else for some other wins here, but anybody else have anything going on they want to share?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Hey, Christian, I hear you.
Hey.
Glad you can make
All
it.
right, good. Yeah.
Glad
We did a decent sized job for Chick-fil-A, their dwarf house down in Hapeville, Georgia. And the contractor sent us pictures of the finished product and will leave us a 5-star review. But you know, when you work with big companies like that and you hit a home run, it makes you feel good.
Absolutely, that's huge.
Yeah,
I mean, you got Chick-fil-A for life now, right?
Well, you know, baby steps.
Okay, well,
maybe a chicken mini or two, but
never heard of a dwarf house. What does that mean?
well,
Maybe I'm the only one who doesn't know that. But
no, I'm on the same boat.
Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, when he founded it, his first Chick-fil-A location was called the Dwarf House, and it has a micro door on the front of the building back in the 50s, I guess, so that, you know, kids could have fun walking in and out of his new chicken establishment.
Wow.
So, you know, he's real family oriented and a very Christian dude, very conservative, etc. So it was nicknamed the Dwarf House, and it just has been completely remodeled over the last year and a half, I guess. They have completed it. It is done, and some of our products are in it, and they're not just, you know, behind the scenes like a refrigeration unit or whatever. I mean, these are beams. These are genuine reclaimed timbers that are front and center in the lobby of it. When you walk in, there's, I think, 9 of them up in the ceiling that we finished for them, custom finished, etc. But you know, it's cool. We're going to go down there one day. I'm going to take the staff down there. We're going to get some chicken.
That's awesome.
What a great referral opportunity. You know, that could lead into so much work. Like that's huge.
Yes, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. So next time I'm in that area, I'll definitely make sure to, you know, say hi to you, but of course,
often.
Check it out.
I'm sure you're in Hapeville, Georgia frequently.
That's my second favorite vacation thought.
Great
I only
idea.
go to one place, so that's why. But
right.
All right. Well, any other wins? Anyone have anything else to share? I'll give you 3 seconds. All right. Well, Tim, I'll hand it off to you here.
Yeah, really good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Rudy getting into the specifics of the tactical training, but to set the foundation for that, I wanna get you guys always be thinking here that the way to build wealth is you build a team. That's the primary way you build wealth, is you build a team. All right. And so I'm going to say that if I get a chance to get on something like this, I will probably say that 842 more times here in this next year. Okay. It's muy importante. That means in Spanish, it's very importante. So anyway, we want to make sure that in your mind, sometimes what we're doing is we're just trying to put out the fire. We're just trying to get quotes out there and get people to accept it and sign the quote, sign the contract, do the work. And gosh, our hair's on fire and we're trying to make it to the weekend without dying. You ever feel that way? So what we want to do is we want to have that mindset where in order to build a team, the way to word that is I've got to duplicate myself. I mean, how many of you looked in the mirror this morning and you said, wow, now that is a beautiful sight? Anybody here? There's several of you in here that could actually get by with saying that, and it would be truthful from my opinion. Some of us, maybe not here. I had a battle with a razor and this I'm still bleeding after about an hour and a half here. So, but anyway, what we want to do, we want to duplicate ourselves. We want to duplicate how we think. We want to duplicate not the exact specifics of this is how you handle this, but here's the problem solving capabilities that I need to reproduce in other people. How many times do you have questions coming to you, wonder why is that still a question? Why are they asking that question? Have you ever explained something to somebody where you think they have it down, they got it down, and then they come back to you with the same question? Has that ever happened to anybody? Yeah.
Every time you've tried to teach me quick math, Tim, every time.
Oh gosh, Nicole, you just have to mute that little mic right now. You're not allowed to talk. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, the interesting thing about Nicole was she, I do figures in my head relatively quickly, and I'm trying to get where people can understand what the client is saying, what their monthly and annual income is, and this and that. And Nicole has been kind of fighting me along the way, but we went through this Profit First training, and she's like our top student. She's our in-house expert, and it's like she's our accountant. So it's like we got to give it up for Nicole here. Come on now, come on, boom, 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 boom. So all right, back to duplicating yourself. Back to the outline there, to our master controller of all things, Bryce, the quiet guy that controls everything. So there's several aspects of duplicating yourself, but you always want to be thinking, how can I get people to make decisions and function in the business without me being there? That's the question you're asking. How can I get the business functioning and people to make decisions and take action without me having to be there to coach them along? All right. And the quicker you do that, the more time freedom you're going to get. So the first point I want to make as we get into the nitty gritties of duplicating yourself is, first of all, you're just take a look at your schedule. What activities are taking the most of your time that are, we're going to call them high PO activities and low PO activities. High PO is HIGHPO, payoff activities. So it's high priority payoff activities and low priority pay activities. And it's good to look at your how you're spending your time and how much of your time is spent on doing something you should be able to train somebody very easily to take over that. Maybe you can't afford it. Maybe you have to do everything now just because your hair's on fire and you're just trying to make it to the end of the week, make some profit. So I get that, but we want to identify high PO activities versus low PO activities. High priority activities that just you can do, and low priority activities that you can train somebody else to do. The more you focus on the high priority activities, the more money you're going to make, the more per hour you're going to make. You want to think about.
When you say that, Tim, does that mean that high priority is what automatically generates me revenue dollars by going out and running service calls myself?
I didn't know you're going to make that into a question, so reword that question.
So would you consider running service calls as the business owner a high priority activity, high payoff activity, or low po?
Well, if you're just getting started and you've got your first few customers, then boom, when you show up, the entire business shows up, right? So we've all been to that position. So that would be a high priority activity early in the game. But if you've got 3 technicians or 5 technicians or 22 technicians and you're still doing that, that's a low priority. You can get other people to do that quickly or easily. And when you're doing that, you have to understand that both directions of a decision. When you decide to do something, you're also deciding not to do something. If you're going to do this, you're not going to do that at the same time. So you really want to take a close look at how you're spending your activity. So it's good to identify what activities are high priority, which ones are low priorities. It depends on where you are in your business, as you're able to hire more people, and how many have at least one other person working with you besides yourself. Okay, most of us in here. All right, so that's good. All right, so first of all, is take an inventory. What activities are you doing that you can easily train somebody else to do? So let's take a look at that. Second point here is, let's identify who on your team shows promise in some of these areas that can grow into the new areas of responsibility. Now, I'd like to say this, that if you build wealth, you're building people, you're building a team. You're really, if you're going to build wealth, you're going to have to develop people. You have to develop leaders. To build wealth is really, you're a leadership developer. It's another way to look at it. Well, I don't like to look at myself as a leadership developer. If you've got another human being that you're training to do something, you're training them. Okay. And so I like to say this, the best way to train somebody to lead is you let them lead. So what in your business are you holding on to that's time for you to let go and let somebody mess up in that? Okay. So think about that. Bryce, let's go on to the third point here. And the third point is identify those activities that are low hanging fruit. They're easy for you to be able to delegate. Let's think about it right now. Let's just think about it right now and unmic your mic unless you've got a jackhammer or a crying child in your background here. I want you to think in terms of what are some low hanging fruit or low hanging activities you can delegate that you're doing now. You guys speak up here on the mic.
I have a quick question in regards to your previous point about letting them lead so you can focus on other things.
Yeah.
At what point do you let somebody lead? And obviously there are going to be mistakes being made. And at what point are you going to say, okay, should I just show him what needs to be done so the mistakes don't happen too often, or just let him lead and have him do the mistakes, or I guess, I don't want to call them mistakes, but do things that it doesn't cost you time or money.
Yeah. So here's the way I like to look at that. Okay. When somebody's brand new and they can barely say their name, in terms of their skill level in your business, then Felipe, we're talking about, I have this thing called a leash. It's the leash process. I'm not sure what's going on here with this. Yeah.
No worries. Don't worry. We're good.
Yep. So Felipe, we want to have what we call a leash, and the newer they are and the least that you trust them is the shorter the leash, right? So you may be a house builder and you've got somebody brand new on the job, you really don't know their skills, and you have them go out there with the 7 subcontractors, and you want them to manage the job and get the thing started. Well, that'd be stupid, because you're giving them more responsibility than they even have knowledge to do, right? So how, you're asking yourself, how long is the leash should I have? If it's a short leash, you may have to go out on the job. And there's 3 ways to train anybody here. Step number 1 is you show them. Step number 2 is you do it together. And step number 3, they show you, right? So these are things that you can keep in mind. But depending on the complexity of the job and depending on how costly the mistake will be, if they make a mistake, the shorter the leash. The more you trust them and the more they're trained, like, we have our Redmond growth coaches, they all started, they all had their first day here on Redmond growth. They all had their first client. Now, chances are nobody in this room is a first client. So we made some mistakes, but every one of these coaches, I don't swear at them, I'd swear by them. I've had some moments though, and some of you guys, you just have to keep your mouth shut here on some of these internal issues here. But so Felipe, we want to make sure that you understand, where is that person at? I think about the parable of the talents that Jesus spoke about in the Bible in Matthew chapter 25. And it said that he gave the number of talents according to their ability. So the master was aware at what level the employee was at. And so he gave responsibility in accordance to that ability. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah. So you're determining how long is your leash, and with, like with the coaches at Redmond Growth, I used to be really close to everything that's going on. And now they make decisions and they tell me, and every now and then they go, well, listen, I want to run this by, before I make the decision, I want to run this by Tim, either you or Robert, just to make sure I'm on the right track. Right. And then boom, they make it. But even then, if you were in our meetings, if I'm leading them, usually my first question after they ask a question is, what do you want to do? You're always pushing that down. You're making them think. I had a guy, and we're taking a little bit of time here, but I had a guy that I consulted that was a brilliant guy. He actually had a leadership training organization, and he wanted me to coach him. And so I followed him around for a day and a half, and he said, I want you to notice what I can improve, what I do well, this and that. So I followed him around for a day and a half and took notes. And so I complimented him on a number of things he was doing well. And I said, okay, well, do you want to hear about what you can improve in? And he goes, yeah. I said, well, do you want the kid gloves version, or do you want me to take my gloves off? He goes, take my gloves off. He's trained at West Point. He's somebody who's at war with the world. And he told me the number 1 complaint he had that he wanted to see improvement here is he wanted more creativity out of the staff. And I said, Brian, and he gave me permission to share this. I said, Brian, you don't want creativity. You just want to be the one that decides. He goes, I disagree with that. I said, well, I've got 28 incidences that you were talking to staff, and every one of those 28 instances, you interrupted the staff. You didn't want to hear their idea after you asked them a question, and you told them what you wanted. And then you hung up the phone and you were super happy with the results. We have such great staff here. Yet you're complaining that there's a lack of creativity. You're not allowing creativity. You're not delegating that. You're always wanting to make people think so they stay engaged. All right, so let's go on to the next point here. Hopefully that's helpful to you guys in management, training
Hey,
staff.
Tim, I noticed that Matt raised his hand here earlier. Did you have a question, Matt?
No, I didn't know the hand was raised.
There you go.
It's
It's a great feature.
All right, so let's go on to the next point here. Identifying areas of low-hanging fruit. What I wanted you guys to do on that identifying areas of low-hanging fruit is I wanted you to talk out what are some low-hanging fruit areas that you can delegate that you've been a little bit slow at delegating. Can you guys speak up for a moment on that?
I have a quick example, and it was with Doig's Restoration and Cleaning.
Yeah.
I asked him that same question in one of our meetings, and he mentioned, well, I actually spend my time filing some, just doing office filing, about 2 or 3 hours a week. And sure, that's not 10 hours a week, but right off the bat, that was a very, very simple thing that we could build a system for, and immediately have his office person free up 2 or 3 hours a week.
Yeah. Yep. So good. So anybody else, just think about what in your business that you're doing that you want to delegate. And you can delegate. Let's speak up just for a minute here, because we want to hear from you on this, just to say, does this make sense? Are we on the right track here?
Yeah, Tim, I can chime in and say that I have a sawmill back in the back, and I use it. I've had it for 10 years or so. And that's used to cut logs and cut antique beams and, cut big ones and make little ones out of them. And I enjoy that. I enjoy going back there and cutting wood and losing myself in that process. Is that the most important, most profitable use of my time? Probably not. But is that a magnificently dangerous activity that I would, continue to enjoy the danger being on me and not one of my staff members? Yeah. Is there a kid here that's young and pretty ambitious and he has run it for me? Can I turn that over to him? Maybe. Do I feel 100% comfortable with that right now? No. Will that day come? I hope. But, stuff like that is not exactly where my expertise is most beneficial. I just like it. It's dangerous. And I don't choose to put any of my staff members in that situation. So that's a tough, thing for me to completely let go of and not pay attention to, with this blade flying at, 70 miles an hour or whatever, and sawdust going everywhere. I mean, that's a decision that so far I'm having a tough time to make, completely letting go of that.
Yep. What advice would somebody else have for some of your other business owners? What advice would you have for Christian?
Probably not a whole lot, because not many people have a sawmill.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily.
No, I didn't ask Christian to comment on his own comment.
Sorry.
I want to say, what advice would some of your other business owners have?
I'm
Toll,
part
please
of
go
a
ahead.
Oklahoma gardening group on Facebook, and this lady just posted, she said she
Well, what I'm obviously, I maybe own a hammer, so I'm not a contractor.
Right.
But what I would say, Christian, is the first reason that you gave as why you're still doing that, it wasn't that it's dangerous or that you don't have anybody else on your team. The first reason you gave is because you like doing it.
Correct.
And one thing that we kind of emphasize here at Redmond Growth is the business is meant to serve you. You're not supposed to be serving it. And so if that is something that you enjoy, it's something that brings you joy, then keep doing it. It's your business. Now, if it comes to a point where it is limiting your growth, you know, where it's limiting your growth or keeping you from your goals or keeping you from spending time with your family or something like that, that's what I'd recommend. Okay, time to take somebody under your wing and train them. But if it is something you enjoy, don't give it up. Keep doing it.
Fair enough.
You know, that would be my suggestion. At some point, you're probably going to have to train somebody. It sounds like you've got somebody under your wing who might be willing to do it, but don't feel the need to have to give that up entirely.
Okay, good answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. So, okay, so let's go back to the last point here, just because I want you guys to be actively listening and not just, you know, passively listening here. How can I apply what we're talking about right now to my business right now? That's the nature of these sessions here, is like, how can I improve my business today, right now? And the last point here is creating a checklist and work with a team member to train them in your area of responsibility. And so in Christian's deal, he may not be willing to let go of that because he doesn't want to pick up body parts around his shop and everything that's attached to that. So I get that, but there may be 4 rules of safety that you have people look at, you know, when you go through the 3-step process of you show them, you guys do it together, and then they show you. And, you know, everything that we do, even if it's complex or dangerous or whatever it is, if we can proceduralize it and get people to sign off on following those procedures, there's usually, you can delegate almost anything on the planet. So how to duplicate yourself, really, we're looking for how can I get my staff to do some of the things I'm doing. So that's what I want you guys to keep in mind on that. Why don't we go on to Rudy for you to bring it home to a real practical thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the best systems that in any business here is just developing checklists. So there's lots I want to say, but this is going to get very practical. I'm going to have some great examples. But right off the bat, you know, what is a system? Sometimes it sounds like, you know, some just something that a buzzword in business. Let's just, well, I need systems. I need systems. Well, very practically, what is that? And to its core, one of the best systems, you know, are just a simple step-by-step process, or just a checklist. That's a system. You know, any questions at this point? No, I hope not. But if you do, that's okay. No, but it's very simple. It's just a step-by-step process. It's a checklist. And, you know, why are these designed to create consistent results and duplicate success? The next thing is a checklist will actually help minimize mistakes or missteps and even increase efficiency. You know, who's ever forgotten a step during any process while working and then ended up having to go fix it and take more time to fix it up? Anybody at all? Thank you for the honest raises hands. You know, everyone's forgotten something at some point. It's just human error. That's why systems are so important. That's why duplicating yourself is so important. So the next point here is, you know, they're an absolute must if you want to scale your business beyond just yourself. You've got to have these systems. So in order to train people efficiently and quickly, you need a process. You know, you've learned a lot of what you've learned through experience, but we want your team not to have to learn through experience, trial and error. We want them to learn through just a simple system. That's the best way to learn, the quickest way. You know, learn from mistakes or learn from other people's mistakes, and that's creating a system. So next slide here. I want to tell you a quick story here on one of my favorite examples on the power of checklists. And this is in the book, Checklist Manifesto. Atul Gawande, I hope I pronounced that right, wrote the book, and he has loads of stories on this. But the story starts off here, how he talks about how Johns Hopkins Hospital had an issue with infections in the ICU. And when I say infections, about a quarter of these ended up in death. So that's kind of a big deal. So before implementing any changes, Johns Hopkins Hospital, they before implementing things, they wanted to make sure to monitor, how many of 5 basic steps were consistently getting done, in order to prevent these infections. So they thought, we need to implement a checklist system, but before doing so, they asked the nurses, let's monitor whether or not doctors are actually doing these 5 very basic, essential steps during ICU procedures. So after months of observation, they found out, turns out, 2/3 of doctors were skipping at least one of these steps, or 2/3 of the time, doctors were skipping at least one of these steps to avoid and help reduce infections. That's an issue. So pretty quickly, they made that 5-step checklist mandatory. There's no way around it. Nurses are backed up by administration. They're going to hold them to it. And after implementing this, early results show that they are able to have 43 less infections and 8 lives saved. Checklist saves lives. Because this was so successful, Michigan University Hospital later implemented that same 5-step mandatory checklist. And guess what? They reduced their infections by, this is 3 months later, reduced their infections by 66%, saving the lives of over 1,500 people.
Is that
So,
the mushroom board?
I get that. What's that?
Something that I want to emphasize that Rudy said that I just want to make sure to highlight here is checklists do not work without accountability. When he told that story, he talked about how nurses had to report to somebody. There was somebody who was holding them accountable. I cannot tell you how many times I have given a client a service call checklist to start holding their team accountable to, and we still have the same problems we've always had. And when I ask, are we holding them accountable to using that checklist? Oh, no, I think one day, I gave it to all of them and I told them to do it. Well, just tell them to
Absolutely.
do it's not enough. We've got to hold
Absolutely.
them accountable. And so it's a 2-part thing. We can help you build the checklists. We can give you the tools, but it's really up to you to really hold your team accountable. That's where the success is going to come from.
Yeah, and there's a really good quote. If you hit once here, there's under the conditions of complexity, not only are checklists a help, they're useful, they're very helpful, they're required for success. And that's in, if you click one more time here, that's in the book, Checklist Manifesto. I promise you, I don't get anything for this, but you can just use promo code ROOD20 off if you want that. No, don't actually use that. They won't accept it. Okay, so we can go to the next slide here. But there are 3 layers to checklists here, 3 main layers. You can also call it the 3 Ps because I noticed they're actually, they all start with the letter P. But I think there's a 3 Ps for just about everything. So I wanted to get that out of our mind. But there's the process layer, the presentation layer, and the purpose layer in each business system. So the first layer, the process layer, is pretty straightforward. How is this system executed? What's the actual process? This is the step-by-step, check this box system. There's not a whole lot to it. It's just, you've just got to have a process. It's the literal checklist. It's the process of using it. Now that's pretty straightforward. Now the second layer is the presentation layer. So a checklist can only be as effective if it makes sense to the person using it. If the person using the checklist has to take a half hour to decrypt it, then it's kind of useless. It's reducing productivity. It's not effective. So I wanted to really contrast what's an effective checklist versus an ineffective checklist. It's specific, it's precise, it gives the resources and necessary details to complete the task. What's the ineffective would be vague. They skip too many steps, or they're assuming something that there's no way of knowing. Concise, details are important. We want to ask ourselves, are we beginning to add too many details or too many steps? I know it's kind of a gray area here, but you've really got to we'll tell you how to build one here in a minute, but really got to make sure it's as concise as it can be, only what's necessary. On the other flip side of that, it's wordy for no reason. A checklist doesn't have to be a 12-page handbook. In fact, it better not be. It'll get real dusty, and your staff will lie to you when they say they used it. So you also want to make sure it's easy to understand. It's got to be written in a way that's truly easy for the person using it to understand. On the flip side of that, you want to avoid useless acronyms, jargon, something that requires a glossary to read and study a glossary before using a checklist so they understand what you're saying. It doesn't just have to make sense to you, it has to make sense to your whole team. And then of course, it's got to be practical. It's got to be useful, something that's actually doable, and there's a point to it. And obviously the flip side of that is impractical, asking too much. This is a great way to make sure a checklist never gets used. So that's the second layer. First layer, process layer. Second layer, presentation layer. The third layer here is the purpose layer. You've got to explain to team members the importance of the checklist. Now, I'm more of a, hey, they asked me to do it, so I'm just going to get it done type of guy. And I feel that most of you as business owners, that may be like you as well. Your employees are not that way, unfortunately. Typically, I'm not going to say none of them are. Typically, they like to know why. How is following this checklist helping the team? How's it helping you? How's it helping even themselves? If they feel like it's just another mundane task, they're not going to really care to get it. So that's why it's getting them to connect to the why that'll help them motivate to use it. When they understand that the following the checklist makes everyone's life easier, they're more likely to use it diligently. Here's a third point. This is a big one. No one is above using a checklist. Sometimes using a checklist, can be perceived as a trait of weakness or incompetence. But using a checklist, it doesn't mean you have memory issues. It doesn't mean you don't know your job. It just means that you recognize human error can't be prevented. It means you're humble enough to want to do a great job. And then author here of Checklist Manifesto talks about how only 20% of surgeons would like to use a checklist in their operations themselves. But 94% would like one used in an operation on themselves. Why am I saying this? Why is this notable? Well, because only 1/5 of surgeons are humble enough to say they can benefit from using a checklist, yet 94% are willing to admit they feel more comfortable with a surgeon that's going to use one on them. Bottom line, checklist does not equal incompetence. Super important. Make sure that your team knows that. When you see them using a checklist, they're doing what they're supposed to do, congratulate them, thank them for it. I even remember an instance recently where I missed out on a checklist, and it was not good. I missed on a stupid step, and that's just, it was 100% avoidable. And in that moment, I don't know why I didn't use it, but it got me. So, all right, do it now. You can go on the next slide here. I get that most of you aren't necessarily surgeons. I don't think any of you are surgeons. If you're a surgeon, raise your hand. No, I know we don't have any here, but you're not trying to save lives. And you're wondering how can you begin to implement this? So just know that you're not saving lives here, but you're saving money, you're saving time, you're saving your precious time, you're saving your team's time, and money again. It's twice as important. So what checklist do you need in your business? So here are the checklists you'll need in your business. Let's just run through it. We have onboarding, offboarding employees, training employees, service call checklist, daily, weekly, monthly office tasks. What are the 16 things an office person is going to do every stinking day, without doubt? The sales process. When you close out a deal, big project, what are the 50 things you have to do with that GC to make sure the job's done? Inspections, safety checklist, upselling checklist, quality checks, just any administrative task. Now, every repeatable process in your business needs a checklist. So I don't want you to look at this and think, oh my, I have so much to work on. Or maybe you're thinking I've done it all. That's impressive too. So just make it easy for yourself. Don't leave any of these tasks up to memory. They're far too important for that. So here's how you start this. You can go on the next slide here. First off, you build one checklist at a time.
Rudy, are you going to make this list available to all these people here? Is that part of what, or I guess by making the video available, I'm going to answer my own question. They can have all these things available.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody just sends in the chat, hey, I really want access to some of this, just I'll send you my Cash App. No, I'm kidding. I'll go ahead and just we'll email it to you, make sure it's available to you. So, but build one checklist at a time. So don't try and solve every problem at once. This is not effective. The best way to do this, as a second point, is build them as you see the need for them. You notice a team member's doing a repeatable task. It's not being done right, or maybe it's taking way too long. They're not productive. Well, it's time to create that checklist. Let's document how somebody doing the job real well, how are they doing it? Or even yourself. So here's how you start that process. Perform the task you need that checklist for. Write down each step as you go. Pretty straightforward. And then, review it. Make sure it makes sense. Read it to yourself. Is it clear? And go through that effective versus ineffective checklist chart. Is it concise? And then once you feel good about it, it's far from perfect, but have a team member use that, perform the same tasks while using the checklist. And then be open to feedback. You got to be open to feedback. You don't ask for feedback, then the people using the checklists, it may not be effective for them at all. They're the ones that have to use it. So we want feedback. Did I say feedback? All right. So after that, once it's finalized, once you feel good about it, just bring that checklist to your next team meeting. Train your team, walk them through it, and then hold them accountable to the checklist every meeting until you feel like, all right, everyone is using it all the time. Then you can bring it up every once in a while, but you've got to have a point where there's some kind of feedback loop where things are being done. And a great way to know whether it's being used or not is sometimes when a step isn't followed, something falls through the cracks and it gets noticed. Someone didn't do this job right. The water heater wasn't well installed, and why not? Well, did you follow this process? There wasn't a review the last 10 times. There wasn't a Google review. Why not? Well, because they're not following the service call checklist. They're not following the process. And, issues will reveal themselves on their own sometimes. And that's a great way to just ask yourself, hey, are we using that checklist we created, 3 years ago? Maybe it's a little late for me to ask this, but, asking a quick question like that is very powerful, and it's very, very important. So bottom line, if there's no accountability to using a checklist, no one will ever use it. You can spot check every once in a while, see if a certain step is being done. If you notice it's not done, ask more questions.
Jonathan.
Yes, Christian.
Sorry.
I was just going to ask if you had any questions.
Well, thank you. And in fact, I do. These checklists, once they are, finalized and all that, are in my situation. I got a wood shop. I got guys working in the wood shop. Do I just file these away and say, hey, you guys refer to the checklist? Do I try and post copies of these things all over the place? I mean, what's the best way, to keep these around without pasting them all over the walls or whatever?
Yeah, great question. It depends on the
Any
task
ideas
here.
on that?
Absolutely. It depends on the task here. And some of them may be, very well worth just pasting it on the wall, because it's one of those where you want to make sure you're going from each step at a time, and you're not skipping anything. Some other steps may not be as crucial, and they're more of a, let's do the task first and then quickly confirm that we're doing it. And if that means, we just want to make sure the checklist is accessible. So we even have like a little folder here in the office. It's got to be accessible, easy to quickly grab, look at, and confirm you've taken all the steps you need to take. So sometimes it's well worth, we have, scripts on the walls sometimes. If someone's salesperson is, going through a sales call and they have to use the same script or, checklist every time, let's just make sure it's right in front of them. So there's nothing wrong with having something on the wall, but if you're concerned that, your customers are going to think that looks a little weird, just brag about it. Say, hey, these are our standards. We make sure nothing is skipped. And that's
Got
okay too. And we're gonna make you have a checklist we can produce for you here and help you through. We make it look pretty as well. I mean, that's just a little side note. We want to make it look, well branded, and it's not just a handwritten checklist or something off Word doc.
Yeah, just
Okay.
some tangible examples, Christian, of how some of our clients have used checklists in the past for like our service-based companies. So this would be, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, those types of stuff. What I recommend is getting our service call checklist, getting it laminated. And then when the guy goes out at each job, he would, go through that checklist. He would date it, whatever job it was, sign it, send a picture of it whenever he's done with that job, send it to your dispatcher, and then the dispatcher will give him the information for the next job. And so that would be kind of that extra layer of accountability there. Now, if he's just going through that checklist and checking all of them, well, that's pretty easy for the business owner to check. You're like, okay, well, you checked all of these, but it looks like a home safety inspection wasn't performed on this job. So are we actually following the checklist, or are we going through it? Another example would be for a lot of my remodelers. We have usually the business owner, when we first started working with a remodeler, they're the ones who are like going to the job site and checking for quality or checking to make sure everything's on track. What we do is we build a project manager checklist that kind of has everything that the business owner would be checking when they're going out to check the quality of the job. And so whenever they send the project manager out to check on the job, he just goes through that checklist, and then he would give that to the business owner at the end of the day and just say, hey, I went and checked the Johnson's job. This is what I saw. This is what we're working on tomorrow. And so, like Rudy said, it kind of depends on the task and how often it'd be performed, and who's performing it. But some of them are worth posting around the office. Some of them are only going to be used for certain situations.
Right.
So it really just kind of depends.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions on checklist or implementing it, or concerned? I have 3 checklists I want to create right now, but I probably shouldn't. Anything like that at all? All right. Well, once again, the do it now is ask yourself, what's that low hanging fruit? Kind of like Tim talked about. What's that checklist? Where's the need for a checklist? And if you're really not sure, just the first time a team member or even yourself, you notice you forget something, you ask yourself, could that have been completely preventable if I had the right system in place for my team member? And be honest with yourself. Once again, no one is above using a checklist. I even have a personal checklist late at night when I'm getting ready for the next morning. I have 25 steps I have to literally write down, and some are as stupid as go to sleep. Okay, maybe not that one, but there's, all in all, it can only help you, and it's so powerful. And if you're a surgeon, I hope you use a checklist.